but some would embrace that as it looks like it's an indicator that growth is coming back big time. All right, 19 minutes past the hour. Let's get to news with Ed Baxter in San Francisco. Ed?
All right, thank you, Brian. The U.S. has eased mask restrictions for fully vaccinated people outside in small groups. President Biden says more than 67% of seniors, two-thirds, are vaccinated, and has made a major impact in cases and hospitalizations. Biden urging everybody to get vaccinated, no matter what age, adults that is. China is stepping up its efforts to supply vaccine to a number of Asian countries, including India. Japan now looking at using Moderna vaccine in large vaccination sites, NHK report. Hong Kong will ease social distancing restrictions by allowing bars, nightclubs, karaoke parlors to reopen and operate past midnight only for vaccinated residents starting today. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo says interest in getting vaccinated seems to be waning. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the country has halted flights in from India immediately through May 15th. And the Biden administration is planning to forego an expansion of the estate tax in the administration's coming individual tax hike proposals. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. Paul?
All right, thanks very much, Ed. Our guest for the half hour is Joanne Feeney. She's partner and portfolio manager at Advisors Capital. And Joanne, earlier you described the tech earnings as all good. I know, though, you see some areas of very high valuations in the market. I'm wondering if tech is one of those areas, or is it justified based on the earnings we've seen, and could there be more upside to come?
Yeah, it really does depend which one you look at. That's why, for our investors, we don't like to do index investing, where we want to pick the particular stocks, that have still the attractive valuations. And those valuations, are looking a bit high across the board, but you could still find some value. A name we've owned for a long time is Broadcom for our clients. It's trading at, 18 times this year's earnings, 16 times next year's. And it has, a dividend over 3%. It's done well, and it's exposed to the reopening trade in the sense that enterprises are now spending more on IT. So they've got good exposure to the 5G cycle. They're in the Apple iPhone. They do software as well as hardware as well as chips. It's well diversified, great cash generation. These are the things we look for in companies we want to own for our clients. Cash generation, a deep moat, protecting their margins, and good growth in their end market. So you can find value. So that's why we don't want to lump together all our tech. You want to really dig into the earnings, to the cash flow, to see where the value lies. But even something that's trading at a more expensive multiple, like Taiwan Semiconductor, that's trading about 30 times. But it has such a great growth forecast ahead of them. Given all the capacity they're adding, that's still one to own at this point. Again, a name we've owned now for quite a while.
How do you want to be exposed to the consumer right now? I referenced the elevated level of consumer confidence, not here, but just in South Korea today. And you look at some of the home price data that we have here in the U.S. for the month of February, a gain year over year of nearly 12%. We know the real estate market is red hot right now. Do you want to be exposed to this in any way, household formation or a strong consumer discretionary story?
Yeah, absolutely. There are a number of ways in which we've been exposed to this, and we think it's worthwhile staying in this trade for a while longer. And one of the things to think about is the newly minted household. People moving out of their parents' basements, trying finally to find a house. And right now, you're right, the shortage is out there, driving prices up. But, a company like Lennar plays to entry-level and one-step-up buyers. And that really is a good fit right now for the folks going out and looking for houses. And then there are indirect ways to play it. A Home Depot. You buy a house, you tend to fix it up, you do things to it. Or Williams-Sonoma, which has done very well during the pandemic, but also is going to be very useful once you start to create a new home for yourself. You're going to buy those accessories, the kitchen gear, etc. And it's actually also pretty attractive right now in terms of valuation. So there's a lot of ways to play the home trade. Magic Investments is a mortgage insurance company. The more mortgages are written, the more business they tend to do. They got really beat up last year. They've come back very strongly, but still at a very attractive valuation. So we think there's still a lot more room to run in the housing trade.
I know you also say that investors have a few things to fear, the valuations among them, also inflation, the possibility of an increase to the capital gains tax. How are you looking at ways to hedge against some of these fear factors?
Yeah, going back to the valuation question, when you do look at some of those names that did particularly well last year, whether it's a Facebook or an Amazon or a Peloton a Netflix. I mean, these valuations are a little scary, particularly when you acknowledge that inflation, eventually will go up, interest rates will go up, and that tends to compress particularly high multiples. So those high flyers that did well last year could be particularly vulnerable. Also, you have to recognize that a lot of people that bought those stocks and own them probably have outsized positions in their portfolios, and they really need to cut them back. They need to get diversified, whether that's because they fear that the capital gains tax is going to go up, or whether they just recognize it's not healthy to have 25% of your portfolio in 2 or 3 names. So we look for some vulnerability there.
All right, Joanne Feeney, partner and portfolio manager at Advisors Capital. Thanks so much for joining us today with your insights on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. We do have plenty more to come for you. We'll be digging a bit deeper into some of those big tech earnings that we saw today. We'll have a more in-depth check of the markets for you as well as we shape up for this new trading day this Wednesday. Looks like it kind of next to slightly better open. This is Bloomberg.
This is the Bloomberg Green Business Report. Fires, floods, and other climate-related catastrophes may have a positive effect. Former Vice President Al Gore says the disasters raised awareness all around the world about the urgent need to act against the fast warming of the planet. Gore, who co-founded Generation Investment Management, told the Bloomberg Climate Summit that we have waited way too long, but he is optimistic that we are crossing a political tipping point. And Gore says businesses and individuals are cashing in. Some people believe it's the biggest investment opportunity in history, something on the magnitude of the Industrial Revolution. He says the declining cost of clean technologies such as wind and solar energy and the outlook for electric vehicles are creating momentum. The former VP says financial firms looking to take advantage of the trend have in the past made promises that weren't kept, but he says things are different now because there are more public demands for action. Jeff Bellinger, Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma.
The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education
And to finish what I started to get my diploma.
just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outseeing 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Lisa Davis, Impact Investing Portfolio Manager at PGIM Real Estate.
I think we used to believe in ESG circles that climate change was the great systemic risk to financial markets that we needed to find a way to account for. And the challenge was to connect the individual investments that we were making to addressing climate risk at a systemic level. I think the challenge now that I see is that inequality around the globe is an equally important systemic risk, often connected to climate risk, that we have to address in financial markets.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's PGIM.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset Management. I'm Steve Meyer, President, Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
What's the difference between you and your competition?
What's your vision in this relationship?
We're guessing one thing is that you are better informed.
European Central Bank President Christine Lagarde had this to say.
Actually, we're not guessing. The realism of this is tangible. Up to the moment news.
Some of the biggest states could see most of the money.
Expert analysis.
Does that mean you're focusing on banks and other financials?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Start your market day with Bloomberg Surveillance.
The bond market, it's a really interesting soup.
Tom Keene, Jonathan Ferro, and Lisa Abramowitz.
Isn't your base case the worst case scenario for
No.
most?
Who says finance can't be fun?
Who's in the zoo, guys? Which one of us?
I think it's pretty clear who's in the zoo.
Bloomberg Surveillance. Must listen, must watch.
I think they made a great decision separating us both.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg Television. 960 to the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
And it's 7:30 Wednesday morning in Hong Kong, 9:30 Wednesday morning here in Sydney. I'm Paul Allen.
And I'm Doug Krisner at the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. It's all about earnings. At the top of the hour, action will begin in Tokyo, Sydney, and Seoul. And SK Hynix is out with numbers above estimates. We'll take a closer look at that momentarily when Brian Curtis joins us. Right now, a few of this hour's top business stories. Paul?
We had shares of Alphabet soaring in late trading, up about 3.5% right now. And this is after the Google parent posted sales that beat estimates and announced a big new share buyback. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow has the latest.
Google's digital ad revenue got a boost from companies wanting to ride the wave of economic reopening following the pandemic. As consumers get vaccinated and venture out of the house, there's evidence they're taking to Google's search services before they do. Video platform YouTube also did particularly well, with its ad revenue surging 49% to $6 billion in the quarter. The company also plans to buy back up to $50 billion of its Class C stock. In San Francisco, Ed Ludlow, Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Well, Pinterest warned of slower user growth in its most valuable market, that being the U.S. Now, the reopening story may be involved in people looking beyond social media. Pinterest saying that monthly average user growth in the U.S. will be, quote, around flat in the second quarter. That would be relative to last year. Pinterest was a major beneficiary of the pandemic. It forced people to stay at home and obviously spend more time online. Well, now with vaccines making progress, Pinterest says lower use engagement is likely as people begin looking for venues outside. And they say that in price there is expectation, Paul. The stock right now is down more than 10% in late U.S. trade.
Chinese diners are venturing outside and returning to restaurants, but not quite as fast as Yum China was hoping. The owner of KFC and Pizza Hut in China reported mixed results on Tuesday. Comparable sales at KFC missed estimates, while Pizza Hut surpassed them. Yum China said a full recovery to pre-coronavirus levels will, quote, take time, and the comeback will likely be uneven and non-linear. Meanwhile, delivery is playing an increasingly important role for restaurants. The company saw more than 80% of orders coming from digital channels.
In the nick of time, China Huarong was able to repay an offshore bond due yesterday that would be Tuesday in Asia with a little bit of help from ICBC. We have more from Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie.
China's largest bank, ICBC, gave Huarong a loan to help the company repay its 600 million Singapore dollar bond due April 27th. That's according to people familiar with the matter. The support comes after China's financial regulator asked banks to extend loans to Huarong to help the company refinance debt. Earlier this week, Fitch Ratings cut its credit rating on Huarong by 3 levels, citing a lack of clarity around Beijing's support for the company. In Beijing, Tom McKenzie, Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
Well, we're a little under 30 minutes away from the Open in Tokyo, Sydney and Seoul. For a closer look at what to expect, let's get to Brian Curtis in Hong Kong. Brian.
All right, thanks very much, Paul. Let's take a closer look here. Just looking at these SK Hynix numbers, first quarter operating profit was 1.32 trillion won. That was stronger than the estimate of 1.29 trillion. And that number, by the way, was up 65% year on year. And sales also had a solid beat. In terms of futures, Hang Seng Index futures at 0.3% higher here at the moment. It's not an active contract. Nikkei futures 29,050. So that's just a little bit lower, but it's still above the cash close yesterday. And looking at dollar yen, we've got at the moment the Bloomberg dollar spot index is up a little bit, and right now we've got that dollar yen number 108.77. So just a modest adjustment there. The euro is trading at $1.2088. So a little bit of strength in the dollar. We did have yields up in the U.S. Yield on the 10-year up to 1.62%. We've got commodity prices continuing to run here. Seventh day in a row for the Bloomberg Commodity Index up. Copper extending its rally, and some of that is tied to the infrastructure bill. We had pretty positive earnings after the bell, particularly from companies like UPS and Google and Texas Instruments. And oil rose after OPEC Plus projected a strong recovery, notwithstanding a little hit to demand in India. WTI crude is at 63.06 now. Gold is at 17.75. And Bitcoin has been very volatile. It's all the way up at 55,018. Some people like that volatility in Bitcoin because for people who actually own it, they can loan it out at a rate of about 10% per year. So, you know, there's not much use case for Bitcoin. So if you can get some yield from it like that, you know, that's not bad. All right, that is a look at markets. 35 minutes past the hour. Over to you, Paul.
All right, thanks, Brian. Time now for a check of global news. And China stepping up its efforts to supply vaccine to a number of Asian countries, including India. Ed Baxter's got details. Ed?
Yeah, Paul. Foreign Minister Wang Yi in a virtual meeting with Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka promoted a stable vaccine supply. That's what it would provide. India still has not accepted Beijing's overtures, but China continues to want to meet. U.S. President Joe Biden, meanwhile, says he is sending immediate aid to India, including parts for machines for making vaccine and PPE, and intends to start sending vaccine at some point.
The problem is right now we have to make sure we have other vaccines like Novavax and others coming on probably. And I think we'll be in a position to be able to share vaccines as well as know-how with other countries who are in real need.
Meanwhile, U.S. CDC and Biden administration today taking what they call the next step toward normalcy. CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky.
There's increasing data that suggests that most of transmission is happening indoors rather than outdoors. Less than 10% of documented transmission in many studies have occurred outdoors.
So the recommendation now is that fully vaccinated people meeting with fully vaccinated people in small groups can unmask. But President Biden does have a warning.
I want to be absolutely clear. If you're in a crowd, like a stadium or at a conference or a concert, you still need to wear a mask.
So concept, know the risk. Mask up when not fully controlled. Waning interest in vaccines in New York City, well,
We were doing about 175,000 vaccines statewide every 24 hours. That number is down to now about 115,000 vaccines every 24 hours.
And Governor Andrew Cuomo addressing the state. The governor says New York City, meanwhile, COVID cases are finally starting to recede after a long plateau. 7-day average of cases has dropped by 34% from last week, 56% in the past month. Manhattan saw a 64% drop in the 31-day period. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the government has halted incoming flights from India.
Today we agreed, in addition to the measures that were announced after the last National Cabinet meeting, to pause direct passenger flights between India and Australia until the 15th of May.
And Morrison says things will be reconsidered at that time. Meanwhile, Japan is looking at using the Moderna vaccine in large vaccination sites. And Japan has criticized China in an annual diplomatic report as a source of strong concern in terms of security for the region and the international community. Japan is once again criticizing Beijing for actions in the East China Sea at the islands there. Beijing has fired back, saying it has lodged a formal complaint and says the islands are inherent territory and urges Japan to redress its mistakes and build a stable relationship. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. Doug?
All right, Eddie, time for Global Sports with Dan Schwartzman. So, Dana, let's play Buy a European Football Club. Is Arsenal really on the sales block?
Why, you got some cash to throw around for this?
Sure.
Listen, I got about $7 in my wallet. That's about, what, 5.5 euros? What do you got? You think we can put together enough to buy Arsenal?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe, but I'll tell you what, in a call with staff, Arsenal director Josh Kroenke, who's of course the son of the owner Stan, says the club is not for sale, nor will they entertain any offers for the Gunners. Reports this week say a group led by Spotify owner Daniel Ek was preparing an offer for the club. Kroenke also says that ownership is willing to pump more money into this team this summer to help manager Mikel Arteta build a stronger first team. Chelsea picking up an important away goal in a 1-1 draw at Real Madrid in the first leg of the Champions League semifinals matchup as Christian Pulisic scores in the 14th minute for the Blues. Pulisic becoming the first American in history to score a goal in a Champions League semifinal match. Return leg will be held next Wednesday, May 5th in London. Conor McGregor selling a majority stake in his Irish whiskey brand Proper No. 12 to Proximo Spirits for up to $600 million. Proximo already held 49% of the brand, which was founded in 2018. During an online discussion with Sportico Live, Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred says that the expansion fee for a new team would be $2.2 billion, which is what Sportico Live estimates to be the average value of an MLB franchise. The company values the New York Yankees the highest in the league at $6.75 billion. Last time Doug baseball expanded with the addition of the Marlins and Diamondbacks, the fee was only $130 million. Real quick, ESPN reports the Dolphins have traded offensive tackle Eric Flowers back to Washington. I'm Dan Schwartzman. That's your Bloomberg World Sports Update. Paul.
All right, thanks very much for that, Dan. In a moment, we're going to be joined by David Kirkpatrick. He is a Techonomy founder. He's going to be here to discuss the earnings we've had today from Alphabet and Microsoft. Stay with us for that conversation. This is Bloomberg.
The world's financial decision makers connect on the Bloomberg terminal, sharing ideas, negotiating trades, and forming an influential network that helps power global markets. Isn't it time you join them? Bloomberg.com/professional.
Do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, shares how we help you consider everything.
In today's ever-evolving environment, the team at Pershing's Prime Services wants to know, what are you focused on now? Are you confident in the stability of your counterparty? Do you feel they can help you grow your business? When it comes to fundraising, do you have access to the mindset of the advisor or have what you need to navigate the ODD process? Exceptional service for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. Whether it's customized financing or securities lending solutions, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your demands, so you can focus on growing your business and producing results for your clients.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Startups and research universities like New Jersey Institute of Technology are fueling the innovation economy. And few people are better positioned to see what's on the horizon in New Jersey than physicist and state representative Andrew Zwicker.
How technology is transforming our financial sector is revolutionary, and so much of that is in New Jersey. We are innovators when it comes to agriculture, and there is opportunity now for great transformation in how are we going to grow food in an ever-growing population, and how do we turn urban centers into agricultural centers. Autonomous vehicles is another one where we have some of the world's leading experts, and how this will transform how those who are either elderly or are visually impaired or mobilely impaired can start to use autonomous vehicles to transform their lives and have access to transportation they could have never had before.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu/research.
Through one place, JCF's endowment helps support Jewish organizations throughout the tri-state area, and that's very important to me and my clients.
JCF's donor-advised fund is the smarter way to give back. Let Jewish Communal Fund maximize your clients' charitable deductions and streamline their charitable giving, since JCF handles all the administration. Get started now at jcfny.org or call 212-752-8277. We have a gift for giving.
Today's business professionals have little or no time for delays or interruptions in their car service schedules. UTOG understands this concern, and our tradition of keeping our customers on time is why many of the finest firms in this city have chosen UTOG as their primary carrier. Please visit us at utog.com. That's UTOG.com, or call 718-361-1110 to open a personal or corporate account. Credit card reservations are welcomed.
Attend the H.C. Wainwright Cryptocurrency, Blockchain, and FinTech Conference, Tuesday, April 27th. A virtual event. Admission is free. Register at hcwevents.com. View presentations from leading-edge crypto, blockchain, and FinTech companies. This virtual event is on Tuesday, April 27th. Register at hcwevents.com. HCW Events reserves the right and discretion to accept or reject registration or participation.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. It is 45 minutes past the hour. Time for a check of sports from around the world. Here's Dan Schwartzman.
Thanks, Brian. RB Leipzig boss Julian Nagelsmann will become the next manager at Bayern Munich after both clubs agreed to a transfer amount which sources say sets a record for a managerial fee. The 33-year-old signs a 5-year deal to take over at Munich starting on July 1st, with Hansi Flick departing at the end of the season. Chelsea picking up an important away goal in a 1-1 draw at Real Madrid in the first leg of their Champions League semifinals matchup, as Christian Pulisic scores in the 14th minute for the Blues, while Karim Benzema scores the lone goal for Madrid in the 29th minute. Pulisic becomes the first American in history to score a goal in a Champions League semifinal match. The return leg will be held next Wednesday, May 5th in London. Conor Mcgregor is selling a majority stake in his Irish whiskey brand Proper No. 12 to Proximo Spirits for up to $600 million. Proximo already held 49% of the brand, which was founded in 2018. During an online discussion with Sportico Live, Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred says that the expansion fee for a new team would be $2.2 billion, which is what Sportico Live estimates to be the average value of an MLB franchise. The company values the Yankees the highest in the league at $6.75 billion. The last time baseball expanded with the addition of the Diamondbacks and Marlins, the fee was $130 million. Finally, ESPN reports that the Miami Dolphins have traded offensive tackle Eric Flowers back to the Washington football team in a deal which includes swapping late-round draft picks. I'm Dan Schwartzman. That's your Bloomberg World Sports Update.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Hi there. Good morning. 13 minutes before the top of the hour. We update markets every quarter hour here on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. Asian stocks look set to edge a little bit higher. Not really clear here from the futures picture, but slightly better numbers. Hang Seng Index futures, for instance, up about a 1/3%. Australian futures up about 1/4%. Growth is looking pretty solid here. U.S. home prices surged the most since 2006. Some of that's down to tight inventory, but we also saw U.S. consumer confidence rebounding pretty sharply. That suggests an economic boom is coming, and South Korea's consumer confidence index came in at 102.2, and that's pretty strong numbers for April. That was up from 100.5 in March. SK Hynix earnings, first quarter operating profit 1.32 trillion won, the estimate 1.29 trillion. The number there, 1.32 trillion, was up 65% year on year. Bloomberg Intelligence says Macau hotel prices are at post-COVID highs, and that signals tourism recovery. And the Asian Development Bank is forecasting developing Asia to grow 7.3% in 2021 and then moderating to 5.3% in 2022. All right, let's take a look at some of the other numbers. Right now, I wanted to mention Meituan as well. Meituan, its ADRs in the States up 7% after gaining 2.6% yesterday in Hong Kong. And that's even after being targeted by Chinese regulators with an antitrust inquiry. Nomura said that the investigation would probably only have a limited impact, and it maintained a buy on Meituan. The yield on the 10-year Treasury, 1.62%. WTI crude, 63.08. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index flat, with dollar yen, 108.74. And that is a look at markets. Off to San Francisco, top stories making headlines with Mr. Ed Baxter. Ed.
All right, Mr. Curtis, thank you. Hong Kong will ease social distancing restrictions by allowing bars, nightclubs, karaoke parlors to reopen and operate past midnight only for vaccinated residents starting today. Japan looking at using Moderna vaccine in large vaccination sites. An NHK report. The U.S. has eased mask restrictions for fully vaccinated people outside in small groups. President Biden says more than 67% of seniors are vaccinated, and it's made a major impact in cases and hospitalizations, while at the same time noting an increase in cases in younger people. So again, unmask small groups for fully vaccinated people, and Biden urging everybody to get vaccinated. China stepping up efforts to supply vaccine to a number of Asian countries, including India. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo says interest in getting vaccinated in the past week has seemed to wane. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the country has halted flights from India immediately through May 15th. And the Biden administration planning to forego an expansion of the estate tax in the administration's coming individual tax hike proposal. So it's left in capital gains and corporate income. And this is going to be part of his plan that he will introduce tomorrow in a speech to joint sessions of Congress carried here on Bloomberg. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. Brian?
Senior Baxter, thank you. Let's get to the media review here. And this is kind of interesting in the China Securities Journal that the yuan FX rate is more likely to be in two-way moves this year. So not maybe gliding one way or the other like we often see, but perhaps, not so much consistency, but a lot of trading. NHK says Japan is eyeing using the Moderna vaccine at large sites. And that is important because Japan has only vaccinated 1.1% of its population. From the FT, China is set to report its first population decline since the famine back in the late 1950s. And the drop comes despite the relaxation of family planning policies. From RTHK and the South China Morning Post, Hong Kong Executive Councillor Ronnie Tong, who used to be a quite liberal legislator, says Carrie Lam is the most liberal-minded chief executive the city's ever had. Tong says, better the devil you know, he supports her re-election, although she hasn't said if she will actually seek it. And also, Carrie Lam will present her own television show on RTHK. The show will be about Beijing's overhaul of Hong Kong's electoral system. And a final note, and this also from the SCMP, Hong Kong residents have bought $1.3 billion worth of homes in London after the UK opened the path to citizenship in July. Hong Kong people snapped up just under 2,000 units, or 4% of London homes sold since last summer. All right, 9 minutes before the top of the hour. Paul and Doug, to you.
All right, thanks very much, Brian. We're joined now by David Kirkpatrick. He is a Techonomy founder, also the author of a book, The Facebook Effect, the inside story of the company that's connecting the world. And David joins us to discuss what else, those big earnings we had today from Alphabet and Microsoft. And David, we'll start with Alphabet, if I can. Quarterly sales topping estimates, the increase in digital ad spending, it's rising after hours. Plenty of highlights there. What stood out for you?
Well, basically, this is one of the companies, along with Microsoft, which we're also here to discuss, that is essentially helping guide the world into a new digital economy. And as we emerge from the pandemic, it's just incredible how well Google, in particular, has done. We're really, they're serving the demand that advertisers have to reach everyone who's at home, who's more online than they've ever been. And Google has the strongest business it's ever had. It's just an astonishingly good earnings report today. They're really firing on all cylinders. Their YouTube business grew almost 50%. They are doing better in cloud slowly all the time, which is a big part of their future prospects and a key area to diversify away from their extremely heavy reliance on advertising, which in my opinion is their biggest sort of Achilles heel long term.
Well, that's interesting you should say that, and I was going to issue the comment or make the comment, be careful what you wish for, because it seems as though there's a fair amount of regulatory scrutiny that still exists, not only for Alphabet, but for Amazon and Apple as well. And the market seems to be overlooking that. And it's curious when you measure that against Microsoft, which doesn't seem to be constrained by the same level of scrutiny, and yet the Microsoft shares are trading weaker here in the late session.
Yeah, it's strange to see Microsoft dropped considerably after the close, and Google jumped in almost by a similar amount, 3 or 4%. I don't think that's rational. I think it's primarily because Microsoft shares have gone up so much lately. People are just taking some profits. I mean, look, in the last 30 days, Microsoft stock is up 12%. So, hey, if you're selling a little bit now, you've probably made a ton even if you've only held it for 2 weeks. But it is an understatement to say Google is facing regulatory scrutiny. I mean, in the United States, Google is being sued in 3 different major antitrust lawsuits, one from the Federal Department of Justice with states involved, and 2 separate antitrust lawsuits that are just filed by groups of states. But almost every single state in the United States is involved with one or more of these antitrust lawsuits against Google, and they have a range of accusations they're making against them. So the chances that Google's going to get out of that without some kind of severe penalties that'll probably even go beyond financial ones is small, and that's going to hurt them long term.
In terms of Microsoft, I mean, those results were still fairly strong. Do you think expectations were maybe a little high going into this earnings report, and now the price is aligning itself a little more with reality?
Well, Microsoft also had spectacularly good results today. You can't really fault Microsoft's results. Again, their cloud business continuing to soar, continuing to slowly take market share away from some of the smaller cloud companies to stay pace with Amazon, which does dominate that business. But Microsoft increasingly really is the primary alternative, with Google kind of playing a decent role down there as number 3. But Microsoft did well in its gaming area. It's just even in advertising around LinkedIn. It really was probably maybe expectations were a little bit high, but look, I think it's just because the stock has performed so superbly well. Microsoft's a tremendous amount since the pandemic recovery. And, their market cap is touching close to $2 trillion. It's easy to see why a lot of people might just say, now's the time to sell a little bit, consolidate my gains. But Microsoft's prospects long-term are unbelievably bright nonetheless.
So, David, one of the themes that we have been discussing quite a bit is the reopening of the global economy. And I'm curious, given the run-up that we have seen in many of these mega-cap stocks, and largely that would seem to be correlated to the either work from home, learn from home paradigm. As that begins to shift, should we be really concerned about an adjustment, maybe at least in the near term, in some of these valuations?
On balance, I would say no. I think that because we are in such a wholeheartedly digital society, even though we will go back to our offices more, we will, walk around on the streets and probably be staring at our screens a little less often. The power these companies have in the marketplace, and particularly Microsoft in its unbelievable position with enterprise software in so many different aspects of enterprise software, as business continues to do well around the world, Microsoft will do well because it sells so many services and software types to business. So I don't, but there are certain areas where you'd have to qualify that. Like, look at Teams. Microsoft is really giving Zoom a serious competition, and Teams, which had something like 20 million active users in late 2019. The last number they revealed was late last year. They were up to something like 120 million. So they had a 6x increase during the pandemic in users of Teams. Now, that may decline slightly, but I also think Microsoft will benefit long-term because people, even like myself, I was never much of a user of Teams, but I've been forced to use it in order to get my work done in the last few months, and I will continue to use it. Many people will do so.
David, you're building a very compelling positive case for Microsoft, but in the near term it does have a chip shortage to navigate. How do you see it handling that?
Yeah, I mean, it is a factor. Microsoft, impressively, has become something of a hardware company also, with their Surface laptops, etc. It's a little hard to say what happens next with the chip shortage. I think it's serious, but in general, it seems like the chip companies are favoring companies like Microsoft over the automakers, as we've heard, because the chips they sell to people like Microsoft are higher margin. But, it's a factor, but I don't think in the case of Microsoft it's a major factor. It might cause them to have to raise the prices of some of their hardware, Xbox and Surface laptops, etc. But, I think the question of supply chain constraints in the overall world economy is really interesting and seriously problematic, but I don't worry about it tremendously when it comes to Microsoft.
Good stuff. David, thank you so much for being with us. If we had time, because we have Apple and Facebook this week, I would like to drill down into that the privacy issue that both companies seem to be wrestling with at the moment. David Kirkpatrick, our friend and guest, he is founder of Techonomy. He is also the author of the new book, The Facebook Effect, the inside story of the company that is connecting the world. Paul Allen in Sydney, thank you so much for being with us this hour of the radio program. As we approach the top of the hour here, we'll get market action underway in Tokyo, Sydney, and Seoul. A lot more Daybreak Asia ahead. This is Bloomberg.
This is WBBR New York, WDCH-FM Bowie, Baltimore, Washington, WJZ-FM HD2 Catonsville, WRCA Watertown, WDOS HD2 Brookline, Boston, WNBP Newburyport, KNEW Oakland, KOSF 103.7 FM HD2 San Francisco, and SiriusXM Satellite Radio Channel 119.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia for this Wednesday, April 28th here in Hong Kong, Tuesday, April 27th in New York. And coming up this hour,
Asian stocks look set for a muted open after U.S. tech shares slip.
Alphabet sales beat estimates and the company unveils a huge new share buyback.
And Microsoft sales rise, fueled by cloud computing gains.
Controlled unmasking outside of the U.S., some relaxation of Hong Kong restrictions, Australia pauses flights from India. I'm Ed Baxter with Global News.
Arsenal ownership response to the rumors the club could be sold. I'm Dan Schwartzman. I'll have that story and more coming up in Bloomberg Sports.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, SiriusXM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Hi, everybody. Good morning from Hong Kong. I'm Brian Curtis.
And in Singapore, I'm Juliette Sali. Bloomberg Daybreak Asia, presented by IBKR, the professionals' gateway to the world's markets. Their clients enjoy lowest cost access to stocks, options, futures, forex, and fixed income from a single integrated account. You can learn more at ibkr.com. Let's head over to New York for a check of the trading day with Bloomberg's Doug Krisner. Doug.
Hey, Jules, it's all about earnings, and the equity market here in the U.S. kind of drifted lower, particularly among the high-tech stocks, ahead of some big numbers from Microsoft, Alphabet, and Advanced Micro Devices, all of which dropped after the bell, and we'll take a closer look at those stories momentarily. NASDAQ Composite and the S&P were each down from record highs, although the Dow did end with a 3-point gain. Right now in Asia, a move to the downside. We have the South Korean chipmaker SK Hynix reporting quarterly profit above estimates. Operating profit rose to $1.2 billion U.S. That's on an 18% increase in sales. But right now in the early session, SK Hynix actually down about 1.5%, and in Seoul the Kospi weaker by 0.1%. We do have a much weaker yen here at 108.80, but it doesn't seem to be helping the Nikkei much. Nikkei 225 is down about 0.2%, and in Sydney the ASX 200 now weaker by just 0.1%. We do have some dollar strength and a little bit of weakness now in the offshore Chinese currency at 6.4845 against the dollar. Crude oil back above 63 the barrel. We have OPEC meeting a day ahead of schedule and agreeing to gently revive production. We'll talk more about that as we continue here on the program. 10-year Treasury right now in Tokyo with a yield of 1.61%. Brian.
Doug, Alphabet reporting sales at $45.6 billion. That was well ahead of the $42.6 billion expected by analysts. Mandeep Singh at Bloomberg Intelligence says strength was powered by an increase in digital ad spending.
It was across the board. I mean, YouTube ads grew almost 50%. So it goes to show, you know, they have a very diversified business now. Cloud is at a run rate of $16 billion, growing at a very healthy 40-45%. And to me, if a company of Alphabet size that's got over $100 billion in ad revenue can grow their revenue at 30% plus, that's phenomenal execution. So really hit it out of the park.
Alphabet also unveiled a new buyback of its Class C capital stock worth $50 billion. Class A shares in Alphabet up more than 4% in extended trading.
Well, Microsoft's third quarter sales rose 19%, and we get more now from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellish.
Microsoft was lifted by robust demand for cloud computing services and the strongest quarterly jump in personal computer shipments in more than 2 decades. Revenue in the period ending March 31st rose to $41.7 billion. That compares with the $41.1 billion average estimate of analysts polled by Bloomberg. Microsoft's Azure, which sells internet-based computing services to corporations, saw sales climb by 50%, matching the gain posted in the previous quarter. In New York, Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg, Daybreak Asia.
Microsoft shares down about 2.7% in after-hours trading. The time now, just about 5 minutes past the hour. Time for global news. So the U.S. Centers for Disease Control issuing what they've called the next step in the path to normalcy. Ed Baxter has global news on the 960 newsroom in San Francisco. Ed.
Yeah, maybe we'll start remembering what that feels like, Brian. It has to do with mask wearing in relation to COVID-19 case numbers. Director Dr. Rochelle Molensky.
Generally, for vaccinated people, outdoor activities without a mask are safe. However, we continue to recommend masking in crowded outdoor settings and venues, such as packed stadiums and concerts, where there is decreased ability to maintain physical distance and where many unvaccinated people may also be present.
So, bottom line is that small groups outside where all are vaccinated then go to no mask. President Joe Biden using the opportunity to urge everybody to get vaccinated.
CDC is able to make this announcement because our scientists are convinced by the data that the odds of getting or giving the virus to others is very, very low if you're both been fully vaccinated and out in the open air.
And saying it has worked for seniors.
That effort resulted in a drop of 80% in deaths among American seniors, a 70% drop in hospitalizations.
But along those lines, pediatrician Dr. Catherine Poling says unvaccinated people of all ages are at risk.
There's a lot of people who think only the elderly get really ill. And as a pediatrician, I can share that's not true.
Dr. Poling says she's seeing kids and young parents become ill. Meanwhile, the president says help is now on the way and in planning stages for India.
We are sending the actual mechanical parts that are needed for the machinery they have to build a vaccine.
And he says there'll be other vaccines then on the market. The vaccine can go abroad. He also says the U.S. is sending mitigation tools like remdesivir as well as PPE. Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the country has halted flights in from India immediately through May 15th.
It will be reviewed prior to that time in terms of any further extension of that pause in those arrangements.
Morrison says case rates are just too high in India. Hong Kong will ease social distancing restrictions by allowing bars, nightclubs, karaoke parlors to reopen and operate past midnight only for vaccinated residents starting today. Tables limited to just 2 people with 4 people allowed in karaoke rooms. And the Biden administration is planning to forego an expansion of the estate tax in the administration's coming individual tax hike proposals. It so far has left the capital gains and corporate income in. This an effort to try and force the wealthy to pay a greater share of federal revenue. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. Brian.
Ed, thanks very much. 8 minutes here past the hour. Our guest is Salish Jha, Chief Economist and Head of Market Research at RHB Banking Group. We thought we'd talk a little bit about the Fed. So we've had a pickup in economic growth, and some of these numbers, U.S. home prices surging the most since 2006. Consumer confidence pretty strong. If we look at the earnings, particularly those that are sensitive to rebound in growth, we see that we may be getting close to some of the numbers that the Fed has said it would need to see before it starts thinking about, and you know the rest. What might we hear this week?
Well, I think they will continue to emphasize that they'll be patient in terms of, looking at the inflation outlook, how sustainable the next few months of a pickup in both the headline and core PC is going to be. And in terms of labor market conditions, is there a sustained improvement, or is it just an improvement temporarily? And then we do not see much improvement. I think they'll be more upbeat on the growth outlook. But look, here's the key problem for the Fed. They have now gone for the so-called outcome-based policy response versus the typical central bank of looking at the forecast and then acting well beforehand. And the challenge for them is really, this is very confusing as a market participant, that then what is the point of having those dot plots and forecasts given by the individual Fed governors? There's an internal inconsistency. And so what that means is that the balance of risks is that essentially there's room for policy error. Because what's the point of having all these Fed economists out there, hundreds of them, I believe, and those guys generate the forecasts? This doesn't make any sense to me.
And Sailesh, what do you think it means in terms of the markets, though, and whether or not we see the reflation trade continue?
Well, here is how it's going to play out. This whole idea of the Fed and certain parts of financial markets guesstimating that the pickup in inflation is temporary. Well, how temporary is it? Well, I do agree with the Fed and certain parts of financial markets that we get a blip on the radar screen in terms of March, April, May, core PC going up, comes down, but then our view is that the balance of risk is skewed towards a reacceleration in inflation towards the fourth quarter and early next year, where both the U.S. output gap and the global output gap would have been completely closed, and the economy would be running pretty hot above trend. So the market reaction is basically that right now, market's been sort of complacent, as you see on the 10-year bond yields, right? That the momentum that we saw is over. At most we could go to 2%, but that's a year-end event risk. Our view is very clear in our minds that by the end of this quarter, we'll be at 1.9 to 2.1%. We get a little bit of stabilization towards the third quarter or so, and then we see a reacceleration in bond yields to 2 to 2.2% in the U.S. 10-year
Even
in the first quarter of the year.
Even that may not be inconsistent with the kind of growth that seems like it's coming. We could see a breakout in growth here. That's sort of what the numbers are suggesting. We'll continue with Salish Jha from RHB Banking Group in a moment.
Asset Man.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the Terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically. Yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, past President Noel Spiegel.
People often ask me why it's important to use JCF for their charitable giving. I tell them that JCF has a profound impact on our community. Thanks to the revenue generated from our funds, JCF makes an annual $2 million grant to UJA Federation of New York and makes grants from our endowment, the Special Gifts Fund. This year, we proudly granted more than $800,000 to support a kosher food pantry at Mid-Island YJCC, Jewish daycare at the Ed Alliance, a renovation at Camp Oakhurst, and an intergenerational Holocaust program at Ramaz. I'd like you to hear about our impact from a past Special Gifts Fund recipient.
Plaza Jewish Community Chapel is most grateful to JCF for supplying seed money to start the organization. Almost 10,000 families have relied on Plaza to provide an affordable yet dignified Jewish funeral.
Let JCF maximize your impact. Visit jcfny.org or call 212-752-8277.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit hud.gov/fairhousing. That's hud.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
It takes coordination to read the latest business news while spreading jam on toast.
Whoops.
Listening takes no effort at all.
It had a major beat on industrial free cash flow.
Bloomberg Daybreak.
President Biden is pushing up the timeline.
Karen Moscow and Nathan Hager.
We have a deal in the gambling industry.
Weekday mornings at 5 Eastern.
The officials have a warning for hedge fund managers.
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Today, nearly all business is international business. The same goes for business disputes. That's why the International Center for Dispute Resolution provides a faster, more efficient approach to dispute resolution across borders. Backed by the American Arbitration Association, the ICDR is the world's leading provider of dispute resolution services. Find out why global expertise matters. Visit ICDR.org.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia. It's a quarter past the hour now. Time for a check of sport from around the world. Here's Dan Schwartzman.
Thanks, Brian. Chelsea picks up an important away goal in a 1-1 draw at Real Madrid in the first leg of their Champions League semifinals matchup as Christian Pulisic scores in the 14th minute for the Blues, while Karim Benzema scores a lone goal for Madrid in the 29th minute. Pulisic becomes the first American in history to score a goal in a Champions League semifinal match. The return leg will be held next Wednesday, May 5th in London. In a call with staff, Arsenal director Josh Kroenke says the club is not for sale, nor will they entertain any offers for the Gunners. Reports this week say a group led by Spotify owner Daniel Ek was preparing an offer for the club. Kroenke also says that ownership is willing to pump more money into the club this summer to help manager Mikel Arteta build a stronger first team. Conor McGregor has sold a majority stake in his Irish whiskey brand Proper No. 12 to Proximo Spirits for up to $600 million. Proximo already held 49% of the brand, which was founded in 2018. McGregor will retain a portion of the company and will continue to promote the brand. During an online discussion with Sportico Live, Major League Baseball Commissioner Rob Manfred says that the expansion fee for a new team would be $2.2 billion, which is what Sportico Live estimates to be the average value of a franchise. The company values the New York Yankees the highest in the league at $6.75 billion. The last time baseball expanded with the addition of the Diamondbacks and Marlins, the fee was $130 million. I'm Dan Schwartzman, that's your Bloomberg World Sports Update.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is all about earnings in the U.S. after the bell. Alphabet reported revenue for the first quarter above estimates. The cloud business did well, and also ad sales for YouTube. The stock was up more than 4% in late U.S. trading. On the other hand, we had Microsoft with quarterly sales up 19%, but shares were down in the extended session by roughly 2%. It seems as though sales may have missed some of the loftiest projections. As a result of what we're seeing right now, the E-mini futures markets for the S&P and the NASDAQ comp, each pushing up by about 0.1%. In Asia, a little bit of weakness in the Tokyo session with the Nikkei down about 0.2%. SoftBank shares down 1.2% right now. The company is nearly all the way through a $23 billion stock buyback program, and this is raising some concern about whether or not we can see a continued bull run in SoftBank shares without more intervention vis-a-vis stock buybacks. In Seoul, the Kospi weaker by 0.2%. SK Hynix shares down nearly 3% right now. Quarterly profit came in above estimates. We had a total on the operating profit ledger of 1.2 billion US. That came on a near 18% jump in sales. In Sydney, the equity market has been fluctuating a bit between gains and losses. Got a 10-year treasury now at 1.62%. You are caught up on the latest in market action. Time for global news. Ed Baxter is in the Bloomberg 960 newsroom in San Francisco. Ed.
All right. Thank you, Doug. Japan is looking at using Moderna vaccine now at large vaccination sites. In a story up on the Bloomberg terminal, it says that Japan has vaccinated just 1.1% of its people, making it among the worst performers internationally. Again, now it apparently is looking at Moderna. U.S. has eased mask restrictions for fully vaccinated people outside in small groups. President Biden says more than 67% of seniors are vaccinated, and it's made a major impact in cases and hospitalizations. Biden urging everybody to get vaccinated, anybody, any adult. China is stepping up its efforts to supply vaccine to a number of Asian countries, including India. Hong Kong easing social distancing restrictions by allowing bars, nightclubs, karaoke parlors to be reopened and operate past midnight only for vaccinated residents starting today. New York's Governor Andrew Cuomo says interest in getting vaccinated is seeming to wane. And Australia's Prime Minister Scott Morrison says the country has halted flights in from India immediately through May 15. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter. This is Bloomberg. Jules?
Thank you so much, Ed. Let's get back to our guest, Sailesh Jaris, Chief Economist and Head of Market Research at RHB Banking Group, and joins us from Kuala Lumpur. Sailesh, wanted to get some of your thoughts on what you're looking at in the markets. We've been talking about Alphabet and Microsoft earnings. You're saying the Asian tech sector looking good from a top-down perspective.
Yes, I mean, so despite what we are likely to observe, that if our U.S. 10-year bond yields forecast is correct, especially for this quarter and early third quarter, we think that essentially if even if the NASDAQ sells off, then the balance of risk top-down perspective is that some of the Asian electrical and electronic exporters are likely to do well. I mean, those are particularly, with no surprise, in Korea, Taiwan, and in Malaysia, and that's on back of our assessment that this chips and all the backward and forward linked products to the chip sector are in short supply. The inventory situation is going to remain very, very tight relative to what we're seeing out there in terms of demand.
Yeah, and Texas Instruments obviously stockpiled some inventory last year, continuing to produce when demand had dropped. So they look like they have benefited. I did want to get to the BOJ Governor, Haruhiko Kuroda, because time is a little bit limited. I know we wanted to look at central banks. It's failure, isn't it? I mean, he will fail in a term to reach 2% target for price growth. That's looks like from the projections of the BOJ, that's a fact.
Yeah, and I think the crux of the issue here is that in terms of the monetary policy framework and the type of quantitative easing that is really necessary in a place like Japan, it really has to be a lot more aggressive in our assessment. Of course, that they have also been, to be fair, hit like the rest of the world by this unexpected COVID-19 pandemic. But basically, Japan is a long time, far away from reaching its inflation targets in our assessment.
We also had the Bank of Japan removing the word extremely when they were looking at the growth outlook remaining unclear. So a little bit, I guess, more positive on the broader outlook there. But we know that the virus curve's very much affecting Japan. The virus in India very much of a concern too. So this kind of global growth story or recovery story in Asia is going to be perhaps a little bit more patchy than what we were anticipating.
Yeah, I mean, our view has been that we're looking for a modest recovery path, broadly speaking, in Asia, Japan, all along. This is in spite of our idea and analysis that definitely Asia benefits from a robust U.S. consumer. Those correlations are very much intact, but all these idiosyncratic risks of parts of the economy opening up, closing down in Asia are going to detract from basically, let's say, a very robust recovery, right? The recovery is penciled in. I think there's no debate on that. I think the debate is more in terms of how strong that recovery is. And, there are outliers in the region where it's a modest recovery path. And so what that means for policy rates is that, they're going to remain stable. I don't think we're going to see any sort of monetary tightening in Asia, Japan this year.
But Sailesh, is growth just simply and purely strong enough that we shouldn't worry too much about a little bit higher inflation and a little bit higher pickup in yields?
That's our point of view. Yes, I mean, if you think about it, that across, let's say, Southeast Asia, which is our main specialty, we are expecting for the curve to steepen. But we're basically just steepening back to a sort of not even a normal economic environment, but basically some semblance of normalcy, right? Not totally. And similarly in the United States. But the problem is, I think, is that market participants have been, let's say, spoiled for so long of having long-term bond yields come down.
Sailesh, thank you. As always, Sailesh Jha is Chief Economist and Head of Market Research at RHB Banking Group, joining us this morning from Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. We are seeing the Nikkei 225, if my screen works, down 0.1%. More ahead. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to the real-time financial news, data, and analytics that can take your workflow to the next level. Power up at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Bloomberg Pursuits look at luxury. General Motors is trying to reboot the Cadillac brand with a $60,000 electric SUV. The Cadillac Lyriq hit showrooms with a 300-mile range in early 2022. GM's luxury brand is going to go all electric by 2030, 5 years before the rest of the company does. Capital One is edging ever more into Amex territory by saying so long to sad salads and hello to yoga rooms with its own network of airport lounges. The Dallas-Fort Worth Airport will get the first of Capital One's planned lounges in coming months, followed by Dulles International Airport just outside Washington next year. Cirque du Soleil, which emerged from court protection with new owners last year, is coming back to Vegas. Cirque's Mystère and O will reopen at casinos this summer. It's the latest sign of optimism as vaccination progresses. I'm Andrew O'Day, Bloomberg Radio.
The following is a message from PGIM.
Welcome to Outsea in 60, Perspectives from PGIM Thought Leaders. Here's Lisa Davis, Impact Investing Portfolio Manager at PGIM Real Estate.
I think we used to believe in ESG circles that climate change was the great systemic risk to financial markets that we needed to find a way to account for. And the challenge was to connect the individual investments that we were making to addressing climate risk at a systemic level. I think the challenge now that I see is that inequality around the globe is an equally important systemic risk, often connected to climate risk, that we have to address in financial markets.
Hear more PGIM perspectives at pgim.com. That's PGIM.com. Partner with PGIM, the investment management business of Prudential. These statements are not intended to be investment advice and should not be used as the basis for any investment decision.
How are financial services firms managing in this new reality? Claire Santaniello, Managing Director at BNY Mellon's Pershing, explains.
If the current times have taught us anything, it's the critical role that technology plays in client relationships. Global conditions have created a business imperative for firms to digitally transform the way they meet client needs and the way they work. Pershing's industry-leading technology enables you to adapt to the evolving ways your clients want to do business, now and in the future, and can help you build an even stronger digital client experience in a simpler, smarter, and safer environment. We have worked with clients of every size to transform their business. Pershing gives you the foundation to stand on, plus our unique perspective, to help you run your business even during the most uncertain of times. We help you consider everything.
To learn more about how Pershing can help you transform your business, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC, member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
The lifeblood of tech startups isn't just money. It's executive and technical skills. The kind of skills that companies need to build real products. And the skills that venture capitalist Chris Sugden of Edison Partners sees in the graduates that are coming out of New Jersey Institute of Technology.
The amazing thing about NJIT is their graduates, they have multiple offers on average, not just one. They're coming out with real skill sets that are immediately hireable and available to them. I think we see an understanding by the faculty and administration at NJIT that we've got to train and educate the whole student, not just their, one side of their brain. And I do think that's sort of part of the DNA today. There's practical and there's sort of academia, and merging those two together and understanding that if we're going to have our young people go get great jobs and have great successful careers, they've got to have both sides of their brain activated. And I think we see that with NJIT.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
If knowledge is power, the Bloomberg Terminal is your power up, connecting you to real-time financial data, market-moving news, powerful analytics, and an influential network of financial decision makers around the world. Share ideas, negotiate trades, and gain the insight you need to make more informed decisions. See how the terminal can take your workflow to the next level at Bloomberg.com/professional.
Every weekday, Matt Miller and Paul Sweeney ask a few of the top market makers and analysts for their opinions. And while it's polite to listen to everyone,
does it make sense that Tesla is worth $660 billion in market cap?
It's more productive to listen to the best.
What's the data that you guys really look at?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern.
What do you expect from Jerome Powell?
On Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. To the country, Sirius XM Channel 119, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
It is 8:30 a.m. in Hong Kong, and here in Singapore, I'm Juliet Sali.
And I'm Brian Curtis here in Hong Kong. Looking at markets, we've got the SX 200 just slightly positive, the Nikkei slightly negative, and we're trickling lower in Seoul, the Kospi down about 1/3%. We did get SK Hynix earnings earlier. Decent numbers, but maybe a few holes to punch in it. The stock traded slightly down in the early part of the day. We'll get to details on markets with Doug Krisner in a few moments. But for now, the top stories this hour.
Well, shares of Alphabet soared in late trading. This after the Google parent posted sales that beat estimates and announced a new big share buyback. Bloomberg's Ed Ludlow has the latest.
Google's digital ad revenue got a boost from companies wanting to ride the wave of economic reopening following the pandemic. As consumers get vaccinated and venture out of the house, there's evidence they're taking to Google's search services before they do. Video platform YouTube also did particularly well, with its ad revenue surging 49% to $6 billion in the quarter. The company also plans to buy back up to $50 billion of its Class C stock. In San Francisco, Ed Ludlow, Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
And the shares did surge in after hours, up more than 4% for most of the morning. Meantime, China Huarong repaid an offshore bond due yesterday with the help of ICBC, the biggest bank in China. Bloomberg's Tom McKenzie has more from Beijing.
China's largest bank, ICBC, gave Huarong a loan to help the company repay its 600 million Singapore dollar bond due April 27th. That's according to people familiar with the matter. The support comes after China's financial regulator asked banks to extend loans to Huarong to help the company refinance debt. Earlier this week, Fitch Ratings cut its credit rating on Huarong by 3 levels, citing a lack of clarity around Beijing's support for the company. In Beijing, Tom McKenzie, Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
And Beijing is investigating how Jack Ma won speedy approvals for his Ant Group IPO last year. This according to Dow Jones reporting. Sources telling the paper the investigation was launched by the central government earlier this year. It focuses on 3 parties, regulators who green-lighted the IPO, local officials who advocated it, and big state firms that stood to gain from it. Jack Ma's relationships with these parties also being examined as part of the scrutiny. Sources say that Ma won't be allowed to leave China until Ant's business overhaul is complete and until the government's investigation is over.
Nomura has suspended a group of senior executives at its investment bank. The move comes as Japan's biggest brokerage reels from the $2.9 billion loss on its dealings with Archegos. Bloomberg's Stephen Engel tells us what we've learned from sources.
Douglas Brecht, he's the global head of prime brokerage division that caters to hedge funds. He has reportedly been suspended. Joshua Kurek, U.S. prime head. Michael Caperonis, head of global equities, also said to be suspended. Douglas Lyons, he's the head of global risk, will stay, but he will have a new job. He will be replaced by Patrick McGorry. This is on top of news that we had yesterday that Nomura is replacing its co-CEO of the Americas, Christopher Wilcox.
Nomura has also hired external lawyers to conduct a comprehensive, impartial review on its handling with that family office, Archegos. And the stock this morning is trading up about 1% in Tokyo trading.
Let's get more on the markets now and head to New York with Bloomberg's Doug Krisner. Doug.
Hey, Jules, I'm seeing a little bit of weakness right now for the Nikkei, down a little more than 0.2%. Communication services, information technology, both groups leading the index lower. It's kind of curious, too, because the numbers that we had here in the U.S. after the bell, Alphabet way above estimates. The stock popped more than 4%. Microsoft reported quarterly sales up 19%, but yeah, the stock did slip a bit. That may have been as a result of a very lofty expectations when it came to those trades. And the numbers from Advanced Micro Devices also impressive, showing that company is making inroads into the market where Intel has been dominant. Right now in Seoul, the Kospi is down about 0.3%, although in Sydney, the ASX 200 pushing ahead by about 0.1%. We did have earnings from the South Korean chipmaker SK Hynix, profit above expectations, operating income rising to $1.2 billion US. That came on an 18% increase in sales. The stock, though, is down 2.6% in the Seoul session. We were talking earlier, too, about SoftBank. The company is nearly all the way through a $23 billion stock buyback program, and this is raising some concern about whether or not we can see further upside momentum in SoftBank shares without rapid intervention. The stock right now is weaker